So hello guys, in this video we will be discussing every single detailed things about STL called as vectors. So to know more about the vectors, that is how the vector works, how does internal working takes place, what are the inbuilt functions the vector follows, and most interesting point, that is the time complexity of every single inbuilt functions of vector. So to know more about this, stay till the last of the video. Do subscribe the Runtime error for the more such amazing videos. So without any further delays, let's get started. So before we see what is vector, let's check why do we require the vector. Because we know that we already have the array, but why do we require the vectors? So since we know that we got derived data type that is called as an array. Say for example, I have the array of size 3, 1, 3, 4. These are my elements inside the array. Now the question comes, even if we are having the array, then why do we require the vector? The point is, say for example, right now I have declared the array of size 3, and in future I want to insert 2 more elements. Say for example, I want to insert 6 and 7. Now the question comes, is it possible to insert these 2 elements inside this array? Absolutely not. The reason behind this is we have already decided the size of array will be 3, and we cannot insert the 6 and 7 inside the array. But here we can get one solution for this. Simply what we can do is we can form a new array of size, say for example 5, and what we can do is we can copy all the elements of a previous array inside our new array, say for a 1, 3, 4, and now we want to insert 2 new elements, then simply we can insert those 2 elements. But doing this every time is lot more time consuming, because every time create a new array, copy all the elements of the previous array inside the new array, and then try to insert a new elements inside the array. It takes a lot of time. Now say for example, I have declared the array of size 5. Now I want to insert only 3 elements. Now simply say for example 6 and 7 are not a part of an array. Now the these two space are already been vested, because I have declared the array of size 5, but I have inserted only 3 elements. So these two space are vested. So these are the lot of drawbacks of an array. One of the drawbacks is when you are passing the array to any function, say for example passing array to function, then what we need to do is we need to pass the array along with the size of an array. Now say for example you are given an array, and we need to find the size of that array. The question comes, how we can do it? If we decide to traverse the array, but how we can traverse it, because we don't know where to end. So in order to find the size of an array, there is one method that is called as, say for example I have declared the size variable, and what we can do is we can use the size of operator passing the name of an array divided by the size of single element, say for example array of this. So this will give us the size of an array, but every time we require to calculate the size of an array when we are passing the array to a function. So if you are using the static array, they are good at some places if our data is fixed and they are not going to change in the future. So static array is good at this, but every time using the static array might not be the good thing. In order to overcome these problems, we come across a new concept or a new data type which we call as a dynamic data type. This is called as a vector. So to now let's check what is vector in detail. Now let's check the syntax of a vectors. So since we know that syntax of array is syntax of normal array. Syntax of normal array. How do we do it? We use data type, variable, and size of an array. So this is the syntax of our normal array. When you're deciding or when you're writing the syntax of a vector, how do we write it? We simply write a keyword called as a vector. In this angular bracket, we write a data type and a name of an vector. So this is the syntax of a vector, how we declare the vector inside the C++. Again, if say for example I have declared the size of an array. Now the question comes, where is the size of a vector? Of course, if you want to mention the size of a vector, simply what we can do is we can declare it as vector. Say for example in the data type I want, and name of my vector is ARR, and I want to declare the size. So say for example I can write here size. Do make sure that here are the square bracket, but when you are declaring the size for the vector, these are the open bracket, open and close bracket, that is called as a rounded bracket. Don't use a square bracket when you're declaring the size of a vector. So this is the syntax of a vector. Now the question comes, in which header files the vector lies? The vector basically lies in a header file called as a hash include vector. So this is the header file where the vector lies. I hope so you got to know the size, the syntax of a vector. Now the question comes, how does a vector works? Now let's check. Say for example, I have declared the vector again of a int data type. Say for example, ARR. Now I want to insert element as 3. Now question comes, do I have the space in a vector to insert element 3? Absolutely no. So what does the compiler do? This is not done by the user. This is internally done by the compiler itself. There is no any role of maintaining the vector of a program by the programmer. It is mainly role carried out by the compiler itself. So what does compiler will do it? Compiler will form a memory of size 1 and we simply put element as a 3. Now say for example, I want to insert as a 4. Now check, do I have a space to insert a 4? No. So what does compiler do is, it simply double the size of previous one. Previously I have the size of 1, now it simply gets double, that is of size 2. It simply copies the element of previous vector into the new vector, that is 3, and now insert a new element, that is 4. This is how internally works. Make sure that this new vector is not done by a programmer, it is mainly done by the compiler itself. So there is no any duty of a programmer to manage these internal things. These internal things are managed by the compiler itself. Isn't this is the most beautiful thing, because the programmer don't need to do anything else. Now say for example, I want to insert a 7. Now the question comes, do I have the space to insert a 7? No. So what does the compiler do is, compiler simply double the size of the previous one. So previous I have the size 2, now it gets 4. All the previous elements are get copied and now I get 7. Now say for example, I want to store 8. Do I have the space? Yes, I have the space, I can insert an 8. Now say for example, now I want to insert a 10. Do I have the space? No. So what does happens? Again the new array of size double the previous one, that is I have the 4, now the size becomes 8, and in this way the element inside the vector gets stored. Do remember that internal working is managed by compiler, not by user. This is the big advantage of using the vector. This is the reason why vectors are considered as a dynamic, because the growing and shrinking of the size of a vector takes place automatically, which is mainly managed by the compiler. I hope so you cleared with this concept. Now let's take some of the standard functions of a vector. So these standard functions is lot more interesting when you're dealing with the vectors, because it helps us to do something in less amount of time and less amount of length of the code. We don't need to write the whole program. We can simply do it writing a single, say for example, I want to push the element. I can simply use pushback. I can say to put an element inside the vector. Now say for example, again I am declaring the vector. There is vector int ARR. Now the vector is my empty. Now this is pushback. So do remember that is b small, I have the underscore. ARR is my name of an vector, and num is a value which I want to insert inside the vector. Say for example, I want to insert a 7. So how we can do is ARRI dot pushback 7. So what does it mean is, my array contains now element as a 7. Now say for example, I want to push as 8. Now what does my array looks like? My previous size get double, 7 is 8, and simply I get here 8. So pushback mainly pushes the elements at the back of the vector. See, I have inserted the first 7, then 8 comes after the 7. Now if I wanted to push 9, say for example, the 9 will come at the end of the 8. So pushback, the name itself suggests that it's pushing the elements at the end of the vector, So this is about the pushback. Now comes the pop back. So before we see the pop back, observe carefully that when I'm using the function pushback, I'm passing the parameter as a num, that is a number which I want to insert inside the vector. But when I'm using the function called as a popback, I'm not passing any kind of parameter, because a popback itself says that the element which is present at the back of the vector, it simply get deleted. Whenever I use a popback, which means, say for example, now my vector has 7, 8, 9. Whenever I call the pop back, the last element, that is 9, it simply get deleted. Again, if I call the pop back, the 8 will be deleted. So element start getting deleted from the back of the vector. For pushback, element get added into the vector from the back of the vector. So I hope so you understand these two functions. Now comes the empty. So empty function mainly returns a true or false. If my vector is empty, it simply returns true. If my vector is not empty, it simply returns false. So it is a kind of a boolean type of a function which simply used to indicate whether my vector is empty or it is not empty. Now the ARR of size. So this inbuilt function mainly used to find the what is the size of a vector. In earlier slides here, we calculated the size of an array, that is manually, that is the size of array divided by the size of array divided by the size of single element. So every time we need to do is, but the beauty of using the vector is that is we got inbuilt function that is of size. Say for example, my vector has a 3 element, that is 3, 4, 5, and if I call arr dot size, what will be my output? Output will be 3. Am I doing any divide? Am I using any kind of operator? Absolutely no. So this inbuilt function mainly help us to find the size of a vector. I have the 3 elements, so size will be 3. Eventually the index will be 0, 1 and 2. So this size mainly help us to find the size of a array. ARR.front. So what does front say? That the name itself indicates that the front, which is meant by the element present at the front of an array. If I call, say for example, if I try to print ARR.front, what will be the my output? My output will be 3 because the 3 is present at the front of a vector. Now ARR.back, it is similar to the front, it simply gives the element which is present at the back of the vector. Say for example, ARR.back. So what it will be give? It will give as 5 because the 5 is present at the back of the vector. So I hope so you understand these three functions. Size basically help us to find the size of a vector. Front basically help us to check which element is present at the front of the vector, whereas the back is used to check which element is present at the back of the vector. Now the insert. So insert is one of the most important function, I would say, because it helps us to put the element at particular location. Here in pushback, we simply saw that we can simply put the element at the back of the vector, but we are not able to put the value at the front or the middle using the pushback. So to deal with these problems, we come across a inbuilt function that is called the insert. Now say for example, I have the array 1, 3, 4, 7 and 9. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now say for example, at an index 1, say for example at an index 0, I need to insert element 100. I want to insert an element 100. So how will I do it? I will simply do it as arri.insert arri.begin. Now the question comes, what does this begin mean? So begin is nothing but an iteration with the name itself suggests that it starts from the first element of the vector. This is begin. So at the begin put 100. So how does my array will look like now? So I will simply at the begin we have inserted 100. So 100 will come first, then comes 1, then comes 3, then comes 4, then comes 7 and then comes 9. Now say for example at index second I want to insert element. Simply how can I do it? arri.insert arr.begin plus 2. From first position I want to insert element at second, so I need to go 2 steps ahead, so 1 and 2. So I need to insert over here. So from begin plus 2, so from begin I need to move 2 steps ahead, comma, if say for example I want to 700. So how does my array will look like now? So 100 as it is, 1 as it is, 3 as it is, now comes 700, now comes 4, now comes 7, now comes 9. So this is how the insert function works. Insert function help us to put at a particular location to insert an element inside there. At this begin, it means you want to insert element at the begin. Say for example, from the beginning I need to insert at particular index. Now for example as second index. So what I did is I simply moved 2 steps ahead from the beginning. So begin plus 2, I am moving 2 steps ahead from this, and simply I am inserting the element. So this is how the insert function works. Now arr.clear. So clear function is basically used to delete all the elements from the vector. Now say for example I have this vector, and whenever I use if I use arr.clear, then what will happen? This whole vector will be deleted. Whole vector will be deleted. Now if you try to calculate the size of a vector, now for example array.size, what will be the size? Size will be 0 because I don't have any element inside the vector. So these are all the inbuilt functions we dealt with. I hope so you understand each and every single inbuilt function. Now let's check the time complexity of each and every single inbuilt function. The front, as we saw that the front is basically used to check the element present at the front of an array. Back is used to check the element which is present at the back of an array. Empty simply uses true or false. If my vector is empty, it simply returns true. If my vector is not empty, it simply returns false. Size is basically used to calculate the size of an array. So all these functions work in big of one time. Now the clear and insert. Insert we saw, again we will come here. Insert, what we are doing is we are traversing from one position to the next position. In worst case, that there might be a possibility, let me change my color. In worst case, there might be a possibility that we need to insert element at the end. So what needs to do is I need to travel from the beginning till end. So isn't that I'm moving n steps ahead, n steps ahead. This is the reason why the time complexity of insert is big of n, because in worst case there might be a possibility that we need to move from one position till the last. Again, the clear is also big of n because I have the array of size n. I need to delete all the elements. So there are n elements, and though I need to delete n elements. Push back and pop back, it's simply what we are doing is simply deleting element or inserting element at first. So we are not traversing anywhere, we are not using any kind of loop. So the time complexity will be big of 1. So this is the most important part of the vector. I hope so everyone has understood it. Okay, now what we will see is whatever the inbuilt function we saw, we will try to implement it in our IDE. So first let's declare a vector. Say for example I am declaring the vector of data type integer, and array will be name of my vector. Now let's check. We saw the size, right, which is mainly used to find size of the vector. Now let's check what will be the size of our vector. array.size of, so hope so everyone knows what does the size function mainly does. Now let's check. See, here comes a 0 because initially my vector does not have any element inside of it. Now what I will do is I simply try to insert element inside the vector. I will do it ahead this. So what I will do is I simply try to push element. Say for example I need to push as a 10. I simply push it into 10. Now we will check the size of a vector. Now see, here it is come as a 1, which means I have the one element inside the vector. Now say for example try to insert element, lot more element inside the vector. 0, 10, let me copy paste and do it as 20, 30, 40. Now what will be my size of a vector? Of course the size of vector will be the 4. Now as we saw the traversing the array, traversing the vector, this can be done by two ways. We know that for each loop, so I will be using the for each loop because it is short and simple. So for atto itx, now what is the name of my vector? arri. So what I will do is I simply what I will do it, this, and at the end I will try to put the endl because we have declared the size. So let's check what will be the output. Now see, 10, 20, 30, 40. So this is what we are doing because we are trying to insert element at the back. This is the reason why 20 is getting added to the back of 10, 40 is adding to the back of 30, and 30 is getting added to the back of 20. Now let's try by popping the element. So in array.pop pop back. So what will happen? We know that the 40 is last element, so eventually the 40 the element will be deleted. So let's check the 10, 20, 30. I have inserted 40, then I use the pop back, which means the last element has been deleted. So this is how the push back and pop back functions works. This is how the traversing the for each loop, and this is how we calculate the size of a vector. Now let's check insert element. Now say for example at the starting I need to insert as 100, inserting at starting. Well, how we'll do it? We will use the insert function where I want to put insert. So begin is nothing but at the first position I need to insert as 100. So what will be the output of it? Yes, we got 100 at the beginning. before 10. Before putting 100, 10 was my first element, and at the beginning I inserted the 10. Now say for example at second position I want to insert 700. Here I dot begin plus second I want to insert 700. Say for example 300. See, at the second position I got 300. So this is how the insert functions work as well. Now say for example I use isEmpty function. I need to check whether that my vector is empty or not. So how I do it? Simply I dot empty empty is empty is 0. What does 0 indicate? Simply 0 indicate it means false. Let me write it in more clear way. Okay, is empty 0, which means it is false, which means my vector is not empty. So these are all the functions we saw. Now let's check the front and back. So what does the front and back says that? Front and back. Now let's make it more clear. Front, what I will do is I need to simply arrow dot front, right, and I will use NL, and now I have to check back. Back again I'm using the NL. So let's see what will be the output of it. See, my front is 100, we are getting 100, my end is 30, I'm getting back as 30. So this is all about the inbuilt functions we saw. I hope so you understand how does the working takes place. Part of the vector, I hope so everyone has understood it. Now let's move ahead. Now the is your input in a vector. Now the question comes, hey Pramod, we have declared the vectors, we have declared the size of vector. Now what if I want to take the input in vector from the user? So how we can do it? Say for example, now if I declare the vector as vector of size, say for example int data type, and now say for example size is my 5. So how we can do it? We can simply do it like we do it for normal arrays. Run a loop from I equals to 0, I is less than 5 and I plus plus. And what we can do is in cin arr of I. So this is how we use to take the input from the user into the vector. We simply do it like we do it to the normal array. There is no any rocket science or any different method for this. We can simply do it for a vector as well, what we did to our normal array. So I hope so you understand how to take the user input in a vector. Now traversing the vector. Now we got, say for example, I have the vector 1 2 3 4 5 6 and the name of my vector is arr. So for each loop, this is a short and simple trick to traverse a vector. So what we can do is vector atto it colon, these are colon and name of an array. If I do cout it. Now this, what this mean by atto? Atto internally what the compiler do is, now say for example my vector is of int data type or my vector is of string data type. So every time I don't need to write here integer or string. What does atto indicate? That whatever my data type of my vector is, automatically I am going to adjust for it. So this is what the keyword atto says that. It is nothing but the kind of iterator I am declaring. All the values of this vector will be get initialized to this variable, that is it, and that is the reason why I am printing the it. I am not printing the array name of a vector. I am simply printing the variable, that is iterator, because all the values of vector is simply assigned to variable called as a it. So this is how we traverse. This is called as a for each loop because it is a simple. What we did is we simply use a for loop, atto keyword it colon name of an vector, and simply what we are doing, we are simply traversing this. This is for loop, for each loop, and in for loop we can simply do it what we do it to our normal array as well. Say for example I equals to 0, I is less than n and I plus plus, and simply I need to print it. So what I will do it, simply arr of I. So this is normal to what we do to our normal array. I hope so how the traversing of the vector takes place. Now let's check how to pass a vector to our function. So say for example in main function I have declared the vector int array and the element is 1 2 3 4. Okay. Now say for example I have the function called as void function. I have called the function fun and I am passing the vector. Now the big question, do I really need to pass the size of a vector to a function? Do we really need? Just think. No, because we have already saw the inbuilt function to calculate the size. Where it is? Yes, here we saw the inbuilt function to calculate the size of a vector. So do we need to pass the size of a vector every time when you are passing the vector to a function? No. This is the reason why I am simply passing a name of a vector to a function. So what can I do is I simply take vector int arr, and if I want to calculate the size, how will I calculate? S is equal to arr dot size, and again you can perform any kind of operation that you need to perform. So this is how we pass the vector to function, and this is the reason why I said no need to pass the size of a vector, because we got an inbuilt function to calculate the size of a vector. So I hope so you understand each and every single detail about the vectors. To know more about this, subscribe to the channels. We are going to deal a lot with amazing things which will help you to excel in your programming. Till then, have a happy coding and do subscribe and like the channel. Thank you.